to see you. My name is Chad Christensen. I have been Olivia's advisor and had the opportunity to work with her on this project as well. Olivia's been a fabulous, wonderful student. It's been great working with you, being ambitious, and I've had her in workshops, editing and publishing classes, and so kind of with this project, especially we got to see the creative writing aspect of it, working through all that, and then working with the design to design the book, and it's been really wonderful. So I'm really excited to check this out, hear the presentation, and here I have your
Oh,
yeah.
yes. Okay, thank you. Do I have to put them on?
You don't have
Okay.
to, it's totally
You
up
will.
to you.
Yeah, okay. Alright, so as Chad mentioned, I'm Olivia and I'm presenting a collection of short horror stories called Phobophobia. And thank you all for being here today. Okay, so let's kind of start from the beginning. Why horror? Why this book as well? So I've always had a love for the fantastical or magical themes. It actually started when I was younger. My dad would watch horror movies with me because my mom was too terrified to watch them with us. So we expanded this love in creativity and this kind of plot devices. The genre actually has ancient origins, rooted in folklore, and often the scary subjects of these stories are metaphors for larger societal fears, which I think is interesting, explorative in this kind of genre. And I also really like this genre has the possibility for exploring novel experiences and safely explore terrifying scenarios. You can read things maybe about apocalypse, the end of the world, and like safely consume this and see like what other people would do, how you would react. So it's interesting to kind of read that scenario. And something so intriguing about the power of language in this type of writing, you take word sentences and you're able to create characters and stories and scenarios that build off real life fears and suspense that scare the reader. I think it's an interesting topic because a lot of horror is built on anthology and archetypes of monsters and ghosts and such, and how you build off of that and make plot twists and stories is really unique and creative. Alright, so I knew when I started this project I wanted to have a reading list, so kind of inspire craft books, regular books as well. So I started with On Writing by Stephen King. Then I went to The Triggering Town by Richard Hugo, and those books were really formative because they broke down the craft into different types like dialogue, what to do, and how to write characters and such. And Stephen King had a great line about how writers have a toolbox, and you kind of have their top shelf of your toolbox is what you use all the time in your writing, kind of like your niche, what you're known for. And then the bottom of your toolbox is kind of some skills you keep on the back burner that you recycle through. And so what you have in your toolbox makes you a unique writer and crafter as well. Then I read Negotiating with the Dead, A Writer on Writing by Margaret Atwood, and then Burning Down the House, Essays on Fiction by Charles Baxter. Then I went into some more craft books on Becoming a Novelist by John Gardner, on Moral Fiction by John Gardner, The Art of Fiction, Notes on Craft for Young Writers by John Gardner, and Fiction Writing Workshop by Joseph Novakovich. And these were all really interesting. They, again, talked about craft. They had really unique lines and taking with me about how to break up your sentences, have short ones, long ones, language importance. So it was really beneficial in kind of forming this collection. And then more into like anthology books and just like fiction books as well that I read. So the top are a lot of my inspiration from this book came from Haunted by Chuck Palahniuk, Bizarre Broken Dreams by Stephen King, and then Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. And so these are all short story collections, anthologies. They have reoccurring characters, themes. They're broken up into short stories so they're palatable, but they have like certain collective themes, like Her Body and Other Parties is about like women and violence and how they experience and what they do to their bodies and such. And so yeah, they're really interesting in that sense as well. And then these down here are just more like straight horror books. So Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, Stolen Kings by Felix Blackwell, Pen Pal by Nathan Auerbach, The Only Good Indians by Stephen Graham Jones, Bunny by Mona Awad, How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix, and Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Chembley. So these are those, although they're not anthologies, they have a lot of things I want to emulate, a lot of good monster study, a lot of great descriptive language. There's a mix of supernatural horror and real human horror, which I think is a good blend of any horror novel as well. So if you're interested, definitely check those out. So diving into a specific author, Chuck Palahniuk, he's one of my all-time favorite authors, and his language and writing inspires a lot of what I try to emulate. So a little bit about him. He's an American novelist. He's published 19 novels, and most notably, he was first published, his novel was Fight Club, which was turned into a movie. Known for transgressional fiction, which revolves around characters combined by societal norms who rebel in unusual ways, and his language often reflects how characters would tell the story. So it's very personable, anyone can read it, pick it up, put it down. The unique way that he spins stories is about they are confined in norms and they break out of them, and that's what makes the plot devices. And his writing style often takes a minimalistic approach, which often breaks into humor or philosophical asides from the narrator to the reader about things like death, morality, childhood, and sexuality. So he has palatable characters. A lot of times you can relate to them in some way, even though a lot of times they're very odd and obscure. But they break into a lot of things that we think about and experience, so that kind of makes them relatable. And his heavy use of plot twists is unique because I think any good horror is kind of like takes you on a roller coaster ride, and at the end you don't know what to expect. So I really think that is great writing technique. He also has a strong visual language and often crude subject matters that blend in his stories to create page-turning novels. He's not afraid to tackle kind of taboo subjects, language. He has a really unique language that he uses in his books, and I think it's admirable in the horror world as well. So one of his craft books that I really liked was Consider This. We read it, I read it first in Fiction Workshop, and then I read it again for this course. And some quotes that I would like to just kind of dissect that he talks about is, do not write to be liked, write to be remembered. I think that's really poignant, especially in this genre, because a lot of times it's uncomfortable and you have to read certain scenarios if you choose to read them. And so I think instead of writing to be marketable or what people expect from you, I think it's admirable to write what you want to say and how you want to say it. And then instead of writing about a character, write from within the character. A plumber enters a very different room than a painter enters. I think it's very poignant because character study is the crux of any story. If you have a bad character, it's not very interesting to read. So I think knowing how to define these characters and make them unique is very important because you don't want to have one-dimensional characters. You have to have different likes, interests, what they want to do. So I think that's very interesting that he pointed that out. And then the job of the creative person is to recognize and express things for others. The best writers seem to read our minds and nail exactly what we've never been able to put into words. Which obviously I think that sums up writing for me. I think I write to express things. I hope it relates to other people, and yeah, I just really like that quote. So breaking into a novel I mentioned earlier by Chuck Palahniuk, it's one of my favorite novels ever. So kind of a synopsis a little bit. It was published in 2005, and it's made of 23 stomach-turning stories, and they're told by pseudonym characters who answered an ad for a writer's retreat, but unknowingly joined a survivor-like scenario, and they have no choice but to confront their darkest tales as a result. So the way that the book is really interesting is there's a prose poem before each character that kind of like tells their story in a mysterious way, and then they go into their story at this writer's retreat that they're telling, and then woven throughout is like how they are acting at the retreat, so it's juxtaposed with their real life based on their past. It's really interesting storytelling, which I think is great. And like I said, it weaves unique character study with short-form storytelling, and it deals with life, identity, existentialism, and the macabre corners of the world. You really don't know what to expect in these stories. They're quite bizarre, and you would never think of them in real world, so I think it's admirable that he decided to write about this. And it also maintains a through line of plot development and similar ideas, which I think is a challenge in writing because you have to stick to a certain plot but work in those realms as well. And then he has this great quote at the end of the book, kind of like an aside. There's one story that I had to read for Fiction Workshop called Guts, and I won't get into it because it's quite grotesque, but he writes about this story because he's read it out loud and people actually fainted when he read it. So it talks about, this is the quote he has in reaction to this. So he says, "Only books have this power. A book is private and consensual. A book takes time and effort to consume, and if you want the freedom to go anywhere, talk about anything, then write books. People write to say the story is the funniest they've ever heard. People write to say it's the saddest they've ever heard. These are the places that only books can go. This is the advantage that books still have. This is why I write," which is, I completely agree. So, on top of that, Chuck's book, specifically Haunted, made it possible to see myself writing a collection of short horror stories revolving around a specific theme. I wanted the collection to be reflective of strong character scenarios humorous blips, and the unique anthology that involves setting stories around collective human fears. So phobophobia was born. So if you're still wondering what this weird word means, it's a phobia defined as the fear of phobias, or the fear of fear, including intense anxiety and unrealistic and persistent fear of the somatic sensations and the feared phobia ensuing. So this, I feel like, was an expansive title for my collection. The 6 stories, as I'll get into later, are about a different type of phobia, and I think encapsulating that, they're all different types of fears, whether it's psychological, whether it's physical, and I think phobophobia captures all of those in one. And this H.P. Lovecraft quote kind of encapsulates that as well. The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. So breaking down the stories, so the first one in the collection is called Arachnophobia, which is fear of spiders, obviously. And it starts on page 7, and you can, if you have the book, you want to flip through it as well. So this one, I really wanted to, it's a common fear, I wanted to delve into that as my first story and kind of jump in the collection, which I think is really interesting, but it has a little bit of a twist if you want to read it. And then the second story is called Bodenstandophobia, which is the fear of grandfather clocks, which I actually did not know existed. This story came out of a workshop that I was working on a while ago, and it kind of took this form of the grandfather clock being personified in the main enemy of this story, and so I was like, wow, is there a phobia? It turned out there is. There's a lot of weird stuff out there, and it's about fear of grandfather clocks. It's just a little story in the middle, and it's on page 17. And then the third story is called Cryophobia, which is the fear of extreme cold. And again, I wrote this story, it kind of came to me in a workshop. I wrote it, it kind of took on a life of its own, and I was curious if anything, obviously hypothermia is a very real thing, but I was curious if there was a fear of being cold or extreme cold, and that kind of morphed into this title. And it's about this ice fisher on this lake and what happens to him. So. And then 4 is Dendrophobia, which is the fear of trees. Again, did not know that existed. Kind of in the same vein, there's a fear of forests, there's a fear of trees at night. Dendrophobia is specifically fear of trees, page 26, and that one kind of took a life of its own. I had this idea of this tree that was the enemy of this story of these 2 kids going exploring, and that kind of morphed from there. And then Scopophobia is the excessive fear of being watched. Again, I wasn't super familiar with this. I wanted a story that was like a stalking case, but kind of with a twist at the end. And this just happened to be a fear of being watched, which I think is kind of a fear that everyone has at some point. So I thought it was interesting to put in the collection. And then my last one is Pororesis, which is the fear of using public toilets, which was quite unique. I never had known that was existed. I knew what I wanted to do with the story. It's kind of like a Scooby-Doo B-movie novella vibe, and I wanted this fear of using public toilets. So it's kind of like a murder mystery and a bit of a weird ending as well. So that's on page 37. So diving into the process of this book, so it was kind of a couple-year-long process. In this first section of the independent study, English 395, I wrote most of the entirety of each short story, although many of the ideas were generated in past writing workshops. I had wrote a couple short little stories, and I realized that they had a thorough thread of kind of horror, character study. So I was like, okay, maybe I'm good at this. I'll try my hand in this. So I wrote some more, and then this is kind of how the collection came about. And then came revising and rewriting during English 499, which was the second half of this class. And along with swapping entire chunks of stories with better versions, I kind of tend to write a story fast and then let it sit for a while and never look at it again because I'm a perfectionist. Then I'll come back and rewrite it and redo it as well. So that was a big part of this process. And then I did organize the stories. I designed the illustrated elements on Canva, so the outside cover, what you see, was in Canva, and then the booklet design itself was in InDesign. And then after multiple drafts and layouts, I sent the final file for printing, which was quite a unique process just because you print it out, you think it looks good on the computer, and then you look at it line by line and it's not forming how you want. So it's a very unique process. It took a while, multiple drafts, and finally what we have today. So breaking down the design a little bit, the cover was designed in Canva. I wanted the darker colors to reflect the genre. I played a lot around with fun colors. I did a blue, I did a green, and I just didn't like how it was fitting. It didn't fit the general vibe and aesthetic of this book, so I switched it with the red and the black. I think it really adds contrast and tonality, which is nice. I wanted a large graphic text, simplistic but effective. I went back and forth if I wanted to put like a horror picture on the front and kind of do it that way. But I think the words itself adds a little mystery. You're not sure what is inside, which is bringing into it could attract varying readers. I think a lot of my stories have varying types. If you're not really into horror, you can read some of them and have a good experience. And so I think making the cover a little bit, I don't want to say basic, but palatable and people can read, I think attracts other people as well. And then, again, the subtle imagery to convey some story content. Kind of the cutouts within the letters are a little bit of a preview or sneak peek to some of the content within the stories. So before I break into some questions, I'm going to read a few pages from the last story in my book. It's in paresis, and if you'd like to follow along, it's on page 37. Starts on page 37. And it wouldn't be inspired by Chuck if there wasn't some crude language in there, so I'm sorry. Okay. So, Hill Sands Laguna is a wasteland of cheetah print speedos and fake tan bimbos. Lounging on brown silt, the only way to pass the hours being idle gossip swaps as foamy waves lap the shore. God, it smells like shit out here, Parker says, sneakers skidding on the parking lot asphalt. That's just the southern perfume, mate. Kit perches on the open steps of the renter van, swinging his hips like a newfound explorer. Once you get past the swamp water and spilled oil, it almost smells good, Kit laughs, whistling after a pair of bottom-heavy twins. Parker plops onto a nearby curb, hoping pre-downloaded rock will somehow salvage this involuntary road trip. Ignore him, he's just grumpy after driving all night, Mick says, peeling off her tank top to reveal a frilly cherry bikini underneath. Sure he is, Parker says, annoyed at Mick's constant insistence on seeing the good and almost goodless Kit, and for flashing her perky tits and expecting Parker not to steal a quick glance. Look on the bright side. Ben emerges from the van, already massaging suntan lotion to his forearms. Nothing but surf, turf, and sand for the next few days. Parker realizes this muscle-headed meatball fails to see the negatives blaring in the morning sun. At least for Parker, shunted on the older sibling, Kit, by an absentee mother, and spending the week as the young, annoying tag-along to a group of college spring breakers wasn't exactly ideal vacation circumstances. Wait for me, Zoe's the last to shuffle out of the van, towel swung over one shoulder, faculties loosened from the few beers she guzzled down on the ride over. Come on, Parker Potty, Mick uses Parker's most despised nickname, knowing the honey on her tongue and extended hand will help Parker overlook its use of blind obedience. Mick turns to lock the van and Parker shoulders an aging backpack, watching a seagull dive in the spray. What's in Parker's magic bag of wonders? The pair sidestep a lopsided sandcastle as they vacate the parking lot. Oh, you know, just my time machine, jetpack, and some snacks. Mick laughs at this, which makes Parker's cheeks flare. Well, between your genius engineering and finding the next cure for period cramps, do you have room to squeeze in a little fun? Mick dips out a Ziploc bag, and inside jostles a clump of squishy blue squares. Candy? Parker frowns, assuming this juvenile gesture firmly cements Parker as a lame kid roadie drooling after Mick. Special candy. Mick plops a piece into Parker's palm, already tearing into her own. Kid told me about this stuff. Is it weed? Parker whispers, taking a sniff. Smells like a stale Jolly Rancher. Mick doubles over in laughter. I know you're not old enough yet to be corrupted, but come on, live a little. I won't tell Kid I gave you one of his stash. Mick slips the baggie back into her shorts pocket. Parker weighs the unknown effects between gaining cool points with Mick. Cheers, Parker says, chomping into the gummy. Easy choice. Right on. Race ya. Mick takes off, colliding with the rest of the group halfway down the beach. Parker swerves close behind, shoving past families on picnics and groups of travelers ingesting tourist trap trinkets. Parker wasn't even close, Mick says once Parker reaches the makeshift setup. A few floral towels sprawl across the sand, tamped down with stray flip-flops to act as anchors. Mick settles into the folds of Kit, who is perched against the red cooler, Ray-Bans reflecting the horizon. Zoe and Ben take turns trying to catch waves with their gift shop boogie boards in the shallows. Parker plants the backpack at the farthest edge, mostly just far from the gross canoodling sesh between Mick and Kit, and leans into the provisional pillow, flipping open a half-read Jane Eyre. Reading? On vacation? Kit stares Parker down through cloudy lenses. Can't get plow, gotta babysit you degenerates. Parker absently flips a page. Kit crushes an empty beer can, tossing it at Parker's head with an unceremonious boo. Soon the flurry of pages and sweltering sun, mixed with the tranquilizing effects of the fast-acting weed gummy, lull Parker to sleep. In fact, when Parker sits up, rubbing sand out of elbows and knees, the sky is red-orange and the beach is vacant. Hey kid, it's closing time. Zoe leans over Parker, wet hair dribbling. Mickey and Kit busy themselves with hauling the beachwear back to the man. Shit, Parker's head's a little fuzzy. Let me run to the bathroom, gotta piss. Parker climbs the sand toward the bathroom shack, posted up with a hack paint job and tilted sign. 5 minutes or we're leaving your ass, Ben calls after Parker. Parker pushes the heavy green door in, greeted by a dirty double sink and 2 stalls. Parker quickly locks the big one, settling onto the seat, transfixed by a shitty portrait of a kraken swallowing an unsuspecting sailboat. Outside the stall, a steady drip of tap water pings into the sink. Parker flushes, squeaking on tiles as a mess of unkempt hair and eye bags stares Parker down through the smudgy mirror. Parker thinks there's no time to dwell on winning matured and unattainable Mick through confidence-boosting pep talk, especially since a group of trigger-happy teens is waiting for the opportunity to leave Parker at the first sign of dawdling. Parker rushes towards the exit, when an empty shoe near their smaller stall's door stains Parker's vision. Parker freezes, hand on the rusted door handle, staring at the booth whose door remains locked tight from the inside. Hello? Anybody in there? Parker whispers, thinking the question might interrupt a possible silent pooper and an awkward fumbling response. But as Parker tilts into the crack between the wall and steel partition, there's no one gripping toilet paper atop porcelain. Just nothing or no one. Oh, wait. Parker jolts back a bit, thinking a massive lens crouches against the corner wall. Parker sighs, resigned to standing on the next door toilet to confirm it's just some drunk passed out from too much tequila and UV. Parker slips on the bowl, catching against the lip of the plastic panel between the 2 spaces. Parker peeks over, seeing a mass of tattered clothes plastered against white clammy skin. The image of blood smeared against the person's, maybe a woman's, midsection is enough to send Parker fleeing the scene for some semblance of safety. Guys, holy fucking shit! Parker practically falls into the arms of an unsuspecting, if not slightly annoyed, Ben near the beach's entrance. Whoa! Ben shoves Parker off, colliding with Zoe, who scolds Parker's lateness. Stop, you don't understand. Parker starts to tug at Ben's wife beater, mumbling half-pleased about something in the bathroom. Mick runs over, backlit by the sliver of a setting sun. Parker, hey! Mick lightly shakes Parker's shoulders, noticing the crazed dance toward the dilapidated shack. Come on, you gotta see. I think there's someone in the bathroom. Parker tries pulling Mick's wrist as Ben erupts in bubbly laughter. Yeah, someone in the bathroom? No shit, Sherlock. No, you don't understand. Parker tries digging heels into the sand, hoping to gain better leverage, but the intensity attracts Kit, towing along a lopsided lifeguard. Kit, what's got your panties in a knot? Kit slurs, plopping one arm over Mick's tan shoulder. By the looks of the half-circle of skeptics, Parker's confidence deflates. Even the lifeguard, propped against his red buoy with a crooked smirk, seems unbothered by the possible development. What's the problem over here, the lifeguard asks, posturing as one young hotshot tends to do. Bathroom, somebody's in there. Parker's voice dripped in ice, seems to sober the uninterested party. Well, by all means, the lifeguard gestures with his plastic whistle, lead the way. Parker stumbles up the hill, while the rest of the crew walks behind in huffed apathy. Parker tears through the door, echoing as it clangs on its hinges. There, in there! Parker stands against the sink, gaze locked on the gaps in the sealed stall. Mick and Zoe lean against the opposite wall, letting the prolonged silence delegate Kit as the one to kneel beneath the door. Fine, pussies, Kit mutters as he drops to his knees, glancing under the opening. Well, is there someone in there? Ben blurts from his crouch by the entrance. Parker waits with held breath. Actually, Kit leans in further, suddenly slipping against the tiles, scrambling and scooting. Fuck, I think it's a dead body. Kit wipes his clammy palms against his swim trunks. I told you, Parker exclaims, sort of relieved the body wasn't a mirage cooked up by the gummy trip. Then with the blank, almost stunned looks of Parker's group, Parker mutters, what should we do? Stand aside, the machismo-reading lifeguard steps up to the stall, reeling back as he kicks it in. The rusty lock goes flying, skidding through the dried blood on the floor. Is it really dead? Zoe asks, grappling Mick for support. In all its glory, between the towering frames of onlookers, Parker can see and smell the hot copper and dried sweat on the bulging corpse. Parker decides it was likely a woman, with matted brown hair clinging to the exposed collarbone. She, Parker thinks this is the final deduction, is crumpled over the toilet, with yellowing sundress disappearing into the tornado of tattered fabric and mangled skin. What the hell happened? Mick clamps a hand over her nose, regarding the shredded pirate parts with muffled gags. Alright folks, thanks to G.I. Jane, this is now an active crime scene. The lifeguard puffs out his washboard abs, deciding the collective gawking has run its course. Everybody out. The group flees, Parker taking a lasting glance at the way the woman's legs are pocked with bruises, bent against the ivory mouth of the toilet.